it's your first time here or if you haven't had a chance to do so, I want to encourage you to take out one of these connection cards. There's a few different reasons for them. And the first is if you'd like to be part of our text alert system, you can write down your info and your cell phone number and check the box that you'd like to be part of this. This is a great way to stay in the loop if we have any cancellations, postponings, or just reminders about events coming up. There's also a spot for you to check different ministries you'd like to know more about within the church, and there's also a spot for prayer requests. Make sure and drop it off at one of the giving boxes located in the back of the worship center or out in the commons area after the service. The guys are going to be playing some volleyball again on March 20th. This is a Thursday evening and it's from 7 to 9 p.m. at the Maslowski. Make sure and join them if you're a guy that's 7th grade on up. It's a great way to get some competitive game in and some good conversation. So make sure and save the date and join them there on the 20th. On Sunday, March 23rd, we are having a movie night here at the church. We are going to be playing the movie After Death. We've played a few clips throughout different services here at the church, so we're excited to be able to play the whole thing. So make sure and save that date. Well, it's free to come to the movie. There will be concessions available for purchase. So make sure to save the date, bring some friends, and join us here that evening. If you'd like to give towards the ministry of Epicenter Church, there's a few different ways that you can do so. The first is by going to one of the giving boxes located in the back of the worship center or out in the commons area. You can also give online. If you go to our website, which is wadinaepicenter.com, click on the giving tab and it'll redirect you to Tithely. There you can give a one-time or recurring gift of any amount. You can also find the QR code on the worship programs. And you can download the Tithely app. It's super easy to set up. I'd love to help you if you need help with that. And I just want to say thank you so much for giving to the ministry of Epicenter.
New allegations tonight of outrageous abuse in the foster care system. Some are calling this a case of kids for cash.
This is the best day ever. I want hamburgers, french fries, and milkshakes.
Okay. Don't get greedy over there. I only get so much money a month for you. This is a job, me taking care of you.
We've set up our hidden cameras at Park Avenue Diner in Plainfield, New Jersey, and we've hired actors to play a foster child, his foster mom, and her biological daughter.
You can get whatever you like. You're my real daughter.
But what about the boy? Well, it turns out this foster mother is in it just for the money.
Are you ever going to adopt me?
Honey, if I adopted you, I would stop getting paid.
If you witness someone mistreating their foster child, what would you do?
Thank you so much for bringing me here.
You're welcome.
Caleb is very excited about his trip to the restaurant.
Can I get a milkshake, Mommy?
Yeah, what kind?
Vanilla.
Can we do a quick vanilla milkshake? No, just one. Just one? Yeah.
Okay. But this woman is about to learn that for Caleb,
But come on, I want a milkshake.
there's a very different set of rules.
She's my real daughter. She gets things that you don't get.
Mommy.
Oh, that's nice. Thank you.
Wow.
Here you go, darling.
That looks really delicious.
You can have her leftovers. Now you're being a bad influence to my daughter. Don't do that.
She was showing me.
It doesn't matter what she was doing. It matters what you were doing.
She watches as Tracy and Ava get full meals.
This will be for you.
But Caleb, he only gets a side order of fries.
How come I can't have a hamburger too?
Because I only get so much money a month. Stop. You need to be more appreciative, and if I send you back, no one's going to adopt you.
With that, the woman is up and pacing around the room. And we're wondering what she's thinking when she approaches our actor's table.
Is everything okay with you?
Yeah.
Are you okay?
He's fine. I'm sorry if he disturbed you.
He didn't disturb me. You disturbed me. You told him you were going to send him back.
But he's not my real son. I can't lie to him and say I'm going to keep him forever.
If you're going to bring someone into your household, you treat him the same way you would treat your kids.
I take care of foster kids all the time. I know how to do this.
That's not, no, it's not acceptable. I think it's time for you to call your social worker, because if you're not going to treat him the same way as you would treat everybody else in your family, you shouldn't have him in your family. He's a child.
He's fine. He's just having a bad day.
I'm about to call the police.
Before she makes that call, it's time to introduce ourselves.
My name is John Quinones. It's what would you do? You all right?
Yes, I'm okay. I couldn't eat. I'm like sitting there. I'm like, did she just say that? Did she just say that? I couldn't eat.
You know this happens.
I know people who have been foster children and they felt that their parents treated them, differently. So I wasn't raised that way. When you bring someone in your household, you treat them like you treat everybody in your family.
During last week's service, we talked about NDEers who stated that our current life in planet Earth is simply summarized as an Earth school. And while life is not exactly as they described it, it is true that every day that passes, there is much to experience, much to learn from, and much that we can screw up. Similar to the opening clip of the show, What Would You Do?, which I absolutely love, they create these real life experiences, scenarios, that some of us may actually experience that will actually give us an opportunity to speak up or to stand down, right? We have an opportunity to do one of those two things. Unfortunately, there will be times that we won't be the bystanders listening from the sidelines, but at times we will be the ones that are sitting at the table living out this nightmare situation for others to listen to and experience. We've likely been in that situation where we've been at a restaurant, at a store, and gotten a glimpse of something similar to this that really was an epic fail. Now, the sad reality, and this is something that we have to admit to ourselves, is that in this room, every single person probably has experienced both ends of that. Whether you got to listen to it from somebody doing it, or you were actually the one that was carrying it out. If we were to take a couple of minutes to just sit and really think back, we would probably quickly remember a number of things, that are opportunities that we missed in speaking up and being able to be a voice, or maybe even situations that we probably would have been better off staying quiet for. We aren't very good at being quick to listen, slow to anger, and we aren't very quick at listening, slow to get angry, and slow to speak, as James talks about. And these are moments that, once again, we could look back to. There's probably a ton of life events that we could look back to and regret. They become moments that we at times look back to continually, that we feel guilt about, right? I mean, if we look at these moments, there's probably some guilt involved for some. And at times, these are events that can shape or redefine how we live and respond in those situations in the future. Maybe if you're a person that struggles with anger, maybe the way that you're going to respond in that anger, maybe if you're unloving, maybe a better way to be loving. Or at times, this is also a reality, which is, I think, pretty common. I think some people, when they have those regrets, what they do is they work extra hard to forget them, to put them out of their mind, and really try to avoid anybody that can remind them of anything that they would regret. But once again, what if those moments, just for a second, imagine with me, what if those moments that we've either tried to suppress, we don't want to think about, that we feel guilty about, maybe that's where we're at right now, or maybe even some that we succeeded and managed to respond like Jesus would, what if we actually got to relive those moments, similar to the opening clip? What if we actually got to capture a video that could be replayed in 3D where we feel so interactive that we could actually watch that moment and experience it, not from the perspective of who we are, but experience it kind of like what you saw in the opening clip again, where you're actually seeing it unfold and there's no stopping it. It's like a train that's going to crash and it's just going to happen. Now, the reason that I say think about it or try to imagine it with me is because this is something that, as we've been talking about throughout this series, there are people who have been pronounced clinically dead, which means that they actually died, they came back, they share their stories, and there's common elements, there's commonalities that they report. And one of the things that they report alongside of everything else that we have talked about is something called life reviews. And to better understand what this looks like and what it is, I want you to check this out so that way you could kind of hear, not verbatim what every single person says, but at least to get a better understanding of the idea behind it. So check this out.
After that, I had what people call a life review. There was a time when I was a teenager and my younger sister and I got into a fight. We fought like cats and dogs when I was a kid. We just did not see eye to eye. And I loved her, but we didn't get along very well. And there was one point when I think I was probably like 17, and she was 14. I said something not so kind to her. And I didn't think anything of it at the time. It was just a way to get her off my back. I was really tired of the fight we were having, so I just said something stupid and not very nice. And she didn't react. I didn't see any reaction in the moment for her except she left. But in my review, I could feel the hurt that I caused her in that moment. And this is the second thing that always gets me. When I felt her pain at what I said to her, that was like biggest teaching moment ever. And that's the one thing I wish I could give to people was understanding viscerally how your impact affects, your actions affect someone else, your words affect someone else.
For a second, once again, imagine, because we're all going to die. We've talked about that in week 1, Ecclesiastes chapter 7, verses 2 through 4, where it says, "It is better to be in a house of mourning than a house of feasting. Death is the outcome of all people. We're all going to die. We're all going to experience this." And if this is true, imagine that a scenario, once again, that you would sit down and think about, that you ultimately regret, would be displayed on a projector similar to what you saw. And what you're seeing is not a scenario that is being acted out of a foster child and a very aggressive, demeaning parent. But what if it was you sitting at the table and somebody that you hurt deeply? All of a sudden, it doesn't seem like we should be doing the things that we should. Now, I want you to try to, once again, follow me on this, because this is something that NDEers described that they experienced. So to really grasp what we're talking about, I want you to try to understand, because we think about this and we're like, well, maybe if I'm sitting in a room by myself watching this, I would live with a lot of regret. But I want to give you maybe a clear picture of what we're talking about. This is years ago, and I remember this was before my wife and I got married. I remember I can't remember if at that point we had started dating. I mean, we knew each other from a missions trip. Then after that, I came up to visit. We talked for about a day, then we started dating. Then like a week later, we got engaged, right? It was like super quick. But nonetheless, this was a period before my wife and I got married. And I remember I had come up from Texas. We were in her parents' basement. And we had decided to rent a movie that we could watch down in the basement. It was a suspense thriller that was called The Butterfly Effect with Ashton Kutcher. And I didn't know anything about it, but I knew the movies that I enjoyed, which once again were thrillers. It had this creepy vibe. And by the way, I should really specify that I'm not suggesting that you should go and rent this movie. I'm just giving you an example. But I figured, it's a thriller, it's kind of a suspense, kind of horror, maybe a little bit. And I'm thinking, well, this would be a great way that if she gets scared, she gets a little bit closer to me, And as I'm quenching my eyes shut, and I'm not looking because I'm scared as well, at least, we can get a little bit close. So we're watching this movie in the basement. It's just her and I. And to this point, it's been an interesting movie. Nothing bad has happened, nothing inappropriate. All of a sudden, we're watching this movie, and it's just her and I sitting on the couch in the basement, and we hear the creaking of the steps, and it's her dad coming down, and he sits down in the chair, and he just says, "Oh, what are you guys watching?" And we told him what we were watching. I hate being interrupted during movies, so quick answer, hey, this is what we're watching. And he sits down, and he's watching it with us, and I kid you not, it wasn't even 60 seconds later. Nothing inappropriate had happened to this point. 60 seconds later, an inappropriate scene comes up, and I'm watching this movie with his daughter, which, once again, I'm not married to. And I'm just thinking, oh my goodness. It's like he's going to think that we're watching like some nasty garbage down here. And he just goes like, okay. Not in a judgmental way. He just says, okay. He just kind of walks away. And once again, nothing inappropriate had happened up to that point. But I can tell you that if I was watching that, or if we were watching that by ourselves, we probably could have just like fast forwarded through it and just been like, oh, that was weird, whatever. There's something about when your father-in-law, your future father-in-law's in the room, right? You're like, oh, I don't want, I'm not showing your daughter this. And it would be the same as your parents walking in on you. You're like, yeah, that was totally inappropriate. That was not okay. And I want you to process what we're talking about. People state that when they die, what they have experienced is a life review of everything that they have done in this life. And it seems impossible for us to understand how we could experience everything in the afterlife in such a quick manner. But the way that they describe it is more unique. I'm not going to get into that. But once again, what happens there is they start to view their life, and often they say that they are seeing this, whether it be with a messenger, an angel, or with God himself or Jesus. Once again, Jesus is God. But I want to make that distinction of how they say it. Now, imagine that moment that I said that's going to be on the projector, it's not just you watching it. It's not your father-in-law. It's not your dad. It's not your mom. It's a person that made you, that created you for a purpose far greater than what you're living up to. All of a sudden, it just sets a new precedent of how we should live. And I think that as we think about this, it's probably something that we hope that it's not the case in eternity. But once again, one of the things that we've been doing in this series is I'm not sharing stories that I'm saying, hey, this is what people that have experienced near death or that are near-death experiencers are stating that it's true. What I'm saying is let's look at what they're claiming to be true, those common elements, and let's look at what the Bible says. Because the Bible is really the standard of how we should be filtering these things out. So with that being said, our life review is a thing. This is what Jesus says in Matthew chapter 12, verses 36 through 37. And this is happening right after he points out that you can identify a tree by the fruit that it produces. And what he's really saying is the byproduct of your life will be the identity of who you truly are. You can fool anybody else. You can try to tell people, hey, I'm this, I'm that. At the end, whether you're producing apples, you're an apple tree, you're not an orange tree. The fruit that you produce will be the identifying factor of who you are. So after he says that, he says this. And I tell you this, you must give an account on judgment day for every idle word you speak. The words you say will either acquit you or condemn you. That's terrifying. The day that we stand before God, we are going to give an account of everything that we said. And as we're going to be talking about shortly, even the things that we didn't say and the things that we didn't do, which doesn't seem right and it doesn't seem fair, but I'm going to expand more on that in just a second. Those are the things that are either going to acquit you or condemn you. Once again, imagine for a second the way that you talk to your kids, the way that you talk to your wife, the way that you talk to people, the way that you treat people, the way that you treat those that you say you love. That's going to be up on display. And that's either going to be your acquittal or your condemnation. I shared a video of this guy by the name of, oh my goodness, Harold Storm, I think that's what it is. Howard Storm. And he shared how after he had his life review, you know what he said? He's like, I don't deserve to be in heaven. I deserve to be in hell. Even though he knew it was terrifying. It was his actions that condemned him. And once again, that's what Jesus is saying. Hey, no idle word is going to go unnoticed. At the end, that will be what acquits you or condemns you. But I want to pause really quick because I know that it's starting to sound like at the end, in the judgment day, our works and action are either going to be what gets us out of hell or gets us there. I know that it starts to sound that way. So I want to clarify that that's not what I'm teaching. You're not in the Catholic Church. What we're talking about is works don't get us there. Galatians chapter 2, verse 16 says, yet we know that a person is made right with God, not by your works, but by faith in Jesus Christ, not by obeying the law. And we have believed in Christ Jesus so that we might be made right with God because of our faith in Christ. Not because we have obeyed the law, for no one will ever be made right with God by obeying the law. That's not going to get you to heaven. Just because you did things right doesn't mean that that's what's going to get you to heaven. And here's the reason why. Because you can never live a life where you're doing things right all the time. All it takes is screwing up once to be eternally punished. And even though that seems unfair, I can ask a law enforcement officer, Officer Milo, if somebody commits murder, do they have to do it more than once, or do they just have to do it once in order for them to go to prison? Just once. You just have to break the law once. And that's what the Bible is telling us. You can't be made right by following the law. For all have sinned and fall short of the glory of God. That's a standard. You mess up perfection, you're guilty. You deserve hell. Following the rules or doing good things is not what gets people to heaven. So let me put it a different way, if maybe this is still not making sense. Doing good things isn't going to keep you out of jail if you break the law. Once again, if I murder, I'm not going to go to the judge and tell him, hey, I did this, I did that. These were some of the things that I tried to do for our community. These are some of the things that I did for my family. It doesn't matter. You broke the law. If you break the law, you're guilty. Once again, regardless of what you have done, you go to jail. And let me repeat the key part of this verse. A person is made right with God by faith in Jesus Christ. That's what makes us right. So I want to clarify, because I know I'm talking about condemnation and acquittal regarding to our works. So it starts to sound like, well, at the end of the day, that's what's going to send us to hell, is that we're being bad people. Everybody's bad. So I want to clarify. The only thing that gets people out of hell is Jesus' finished work on the cross. Nothing more and nothing less. A better way to put it is something that we know as the 5 solas. We are saved by grace alone, through faith alone, by the work of Christ alone, according to the Scripture alone, for the glory of God alone. There's nothing more. That's it. If your works or my works get us out of hell, it's no longer grace, it's merit. That means that we did something so that we could earn that. That's not what the Bible teaches. For it is by grace you have been saved, not by works that you should boast. Ephesians chapter 2, verses 8 through 10. Once again, that would be working to achieve salvation. Now, that's a point of clarification, because you have to understand we're talking about something that could start to blur the lines of us thinking that at the end, if we screw it up somehow, we're going to end up in hell. That's not how salvation works. But I also want to clarify. This is the reason that that's important to know. People's words and actions, condemning them, is not a direct link for the end result. That's not what it's telling you. It's not that because you were bad, you ended up in hell, but rather the people's actions and words are the identifying mark of the kind of tree that they are and the kind of fruit that they're producing. Once again, so one would say, well, I'm good enough, so I'm a Christian because I do good things. That's what's going to get me to heaven. The other one says, I am saved by Christ and I produce good fruit because I am a tree that is identified by Christ, and I am a Christian based on the merit of Christ. Maybe a different way to look at this is that actions are the identifying hallmark for a shepherd who is trying to separate a flock. And we're going to get a clear picture of this. I said I was going to come back to the second thing, right? It's not just the things that we say, it's also the things that we don't say and the things that we don't do that are going to condemn people. And once again, we get this clear picture in Matthew chapter 25, where Jesus refers to the judgment day. And he says that at the end of the age, during this judgment day, all the nations will be gathered in his presence, and he will separate people as a shepherd separates the sheep from the goats. He will place the sheep at his right hand and the goats at his left hand. So now we're getting this picture, right? So a Christian is identified by the tree or by the fruit that they're producing, and then we get this picture that at the end people are going to be separated according to goats and sheep. And this passage, we're going to see that judgment is pronounced both on the sheep who are spared and the goats who are sentenced for destruction. But to give us a better understanding of how acquittal and condemnation comes, not just by what we say or do, but the lack of it. Here is what Jesus says. He says to be, in regards to the sheep who are identified, he says this regarding them. And it's a longer passage, so I'm just going to read the part where it's pertaining to the sheep. The opposite would pertain to the goats. Starting with verse 24, he says, "Then the king will say to those on the right, 'Come, you who are blessed by my Father, inherit the kingdom prepared for you from the creation of the world. For I was hungry, and you fed me. I was thirsty, and you gave me a drink. I was a stranger, and you invited me into your home. I was naked, and you gave me clothing. I was sick, and you cared for me. I was in prison, and you visited me.' Then these righteous ones will reply, 'Lord, when did we ever see you hungry and feed you, or thirsty and give you something to drink, or a stranger and show you hospitality, or naked and give you clothing? When did we ever see you sick or in prison and visit you?' And the king will say, 'I tell you the truth, when you did it to one of the least of these, my brothers and sisters, you are doing it to me.'" There are things that we do, and if you read that passage, you will find that the goats, they're condemned because they did not do. They saw and they ignored. They're not condemned for what they did, they're condemned for what they didn't do. How many times have we been in a situation like in the opening clip where there was a situation where we could have done something about it, but rather than speaking up, we simply turned the other way? I want to repeat this again because I don't think it could be emphasized enough. Your works, my works, will not save us. That's not what this passage is saying. But your deeds, my deeds, are the identifying marker of who is inside of us. That's what identifies us. You can be the foster parent who is doing the right thing, but you're doing it with the wrong motive. You understand the difference? To people, you're incredible. You're doing something that really, it begs to be honored. But if your motive is all wrong, God sees your fruit. You can be the person in the street who sees a need, but rather than meeting it, you continue to walk. Think about it. How many times has there been an opportunity that we missed? So once again, we could think about the regrets that we have just even this morning. We could think about the regrets that we have for the week. The way that we responded to someone. And I can tell you that being in ministry, I've had my own failures, but I've also seen a lot of failures where the biggest hurdle that people have is pride. They refuse to acknowledge that they're wrong. Once again, we see these things and we just think, well, we're too busy. We think, well, maybe somebody else is called to address that. You have no idea how many times I've heard within the church, hey, you know what, we need a ministry for this. Can you get it started? It's like, man, if God's putting it in your heart and not in mine, maybe that's a sign that it's not for me, it's for you. You know, we can look at something and say, well, that's not really my gifting. If God gave you the opportunity, meet it to the best of your ability. Because one day we're going to give account for that. And I honestly am convinced that even those who are saved, I think that we will remember those things when we have what some call the life review. I think that we're still going to experience those things. I think we're still going to remember those things. Even if you're saved, we'll see it and we'll remember. And that's not a determining factor that you're heading to hell, not necessarily, but it's a reminder that you missed an opportunity that could have changed somebody else. When I was growing up, I remember, and some of you are probably close to my age or similar, some of you were probably giving it to your kids, but when I was growing up, I remember something that was trending were these bracelets that were all over the place, and they had a 4-letter acronym. And they were meant to serve as a reminder of how we should respond in our sin and even circumstances like that opening clip. Like, in other words, we're there, like, how should we respond in situations where we're being tempted or maybe even where we should be speaking up? It was 4 letters with a question mark at the end, and I'm guessing that you probably know what those 4 letters were. WWJD question mark. What would Jesus do? Regrettably, most of us didn't, we wore the bracelet and then we're like frustrated as we're answering, right? It's kind of like the people like that deal with road rage and have the little fish in the back. You're like, oh yeah, that's a Christian right there. It's me, I'm sorry. But right, it's that idea. We have the reminder, but unfortunately, we respond out of impulse and frustration rather than out of love and out of grace. And I get it. Living like Jesus seems like a really hard task. I get that. Especially when you consider that he was God, right, after all. But the beauty of it is that the Bible tells us that he took on the form of a man and he was exactly in every way like us. But yet, he did not sin. And we see Jesus' humanity when we even see a limitation of what he experiences on earth. When he says, neither I nor the angels in heaven know the day of his return. We see that there's a limitation. It doesn't mean that he's not God, but his life on earth was experienced with pain and suffering. When he was at the cross, he was no less of a human that experienced any less pain. And it might be easy to say, well, Jesus, I get it, but he doesn't fully get it. And it just seems like a really hard task to measure up to. I understand that, because at times I feel that way. It's like, well, I can't live like Jesus. Like, okay, you're talking about, God incarnate. So maybe we should kind of step back a little bit and try to see it from a different angle, right? If Jesus seems like too hard of a task to try to measure up to, what if we actually maybe began to see each situation through a different lens? What if we responded to each moment, each experience, in this way? To do to others whatever you would have them do unto you. What if we just responded that way? Right? Living like Jesus seems impossible, but what if we actually lived in a way that we just wanted to be treated? What if you began to see your spouse through the lens of what you wish you could experience? What if you began to see your kids through the lens of what you wish you would have experienced as a kid? What if you would feel somebody's pain for just a second? What if? So I want to clarify with this next statement that I'm going to make that Jesus will always be the standard of how we should live, right? WWJD, what would Jesus do? That's a standard. But I want you just to think about this for a second, right? Just think about this with me. What if the standard of how we treat others is the same measurement that we wish we could experience from others for ourselves? What if, right? What if we just moved away from the standard of Jesus being that standard to saying, hey, okay, I'll just bring it down a notch and say, the standard will be, I will treat others how I wish somebody would treat me. Extending the forgiveness that we wish we could receive. Mirroring not the broken or absence of love that others give us, but the love that we wish we could have gotten. The golden rule. If it could be that simple. It would be as simple as being in that restaurant where the foster kid was at, imagining that it's you sitting in that chair, getting that treatment, and thinking of how you wish somebody would respond for you, just doing it. Even if your voice is shaking, even if you're terrified, standing up for the least of these. And I am convinced that when we can figure out what we should do, right, with that in mind, the golden rule, do unto others as you would have them do unto you, when you can figure out what you should do, you will quickly realize what Jesus would do. And if there is a life review as some into your state, and I believe that it's true, then we will be reminded of what we actually did. And I pray that it's well done, good and faithful servant. I pray. And I want to leave you, I know that some of you take notes, some of you don't. So I want to, if you do take notes, I want you to jot this note down, whether it be on your worship programs or if you have your Bible. Maybe as a good reminder right next to Matthew chapter 7, verse 12. This would be another great place to put it. But I want you to write three different things, three different acronyms, just as a reminder. They're super simple. What would you do? WWYD. WWJD, what would Jesus do? And the last one is a reminder for when we enter eternity. WDYD. What did you do? Put yourself in somebody else's shoes to know what you would do. Ask yourself, what would Jesus do? And know that at the end, we will be faced with that last acronym. What did you do? As a husband, as a dad, as a son, as a brother, as an uncle, as a friend, as a pastor, I can tell you, I'm telling you, I have had moments that I have failed not only privately, but publicly. And it stinks. It really does. I don't have to wait for my life review. I experience that moment nearly on a daily basis. And I will keep it real and say that at times I guilt myself in those things. Other times, and this is where I'm keeping it really real. I know that some of you are going to be like, what? But it's true. I have pronounced judgment in my mind in areas that I expected to receive grace in. It is terrible to say out loud, right? That I have a double standard. Standard for you, standard for me. I want grace, some deserve judgment. Because in my mind, they're not repentful enough. They don't repent enough. And I'm not talking about your sin, I'm talking about the way that you treat others. And once again, it's terrible to say out loud, which makes it even more difficult imagining that at one point in eternity, we will relive and re-experience those moments, and I will experience it in my life review. How many times have we treated others harshly in the very same areas that we have failed ourselves? Think about it. I'm telling you, I've done it. I know I've done it. We want grace, but at the same time, it's like, yeah, those people don't deserve it. They're probably not as good as I am. They're probably not as repentful as I am. This is a double standard. Romans chapter 2, verse 1 states, you may think you can condemn such people, but you are just as bad and you have no excuse. When you say they are wicked and should be punished, you are condemning yourself. The measurement you use on others will be the measurement that is used on you. Matthew chapter 7, I believe it's verse 2. For you who judge others do these very same things. Once again, how many people do that? Like there's a standard for ourselves, there's a standard for others. That's terrible. I'm reminding you, I am a broken man who is as much in a desperate need of receiving the grace that I often fail to hand out. I get that. One day we'll all stand before the throne of God to give account for all that we did and all that we didn't say and do. That's just the truth. And I want to just clarify, this is not a message to condemn us for our failures, for the failures of our past, but maybe to challenge us and to motivate us to rethink about the choices and the decisions that we might make in the future. The way that we're treating each other. Think about it. Even in the Bible, it says to make allowance for each other's fault within the church. Why? Because we're all screwed up people. Make allowance for each other. You're all going to screw up. And again, this is not a message to condemn. This is a message to help us to understand that we may have regrets. Don't continue to live in a way that you're going to accumulate more regrets. In your worship program, you will find a quote by John Piper, and it says, a life without regrets is a life built on a mirage. You know what a mirage is? It is when you get super, imagine, this is what I picture, is being in a desert super thirsty and you begin to see palms and water where there is none. It's a great quote. A life without regrets is not real. We are humans who don't always make the right choices. And that's ultimately going to lead in regrets. If we claim that we have a life that is void of regrets, you're living in an optical illusion. That's not real. Either that or you're prideful. And you have to realize that there's a lot of things that you've done wrong that you just failed to man up to. Or woman up to. I don't know. Maybe that's not even a thing. But once again, just because life has regrets, it doesn't mean that we should strive to live with as much regret as possible. But it's this reminder that we'll mess up at times. We're all going to screw up. But out of that regret, we should learn on how to live, how to treat others, how to view and respond in each situation. I mean, holy smokes, some of us, it's like we just keep on tripping up in the same thing. And I get it. It's a struggle. I'm not diminishing that. I'm not belittling that. We all have struggles. But maybe the next time that we lose it or we do something that we know we wouldn't be proud of, stop putting yourself at the center of your world and put somebody else in the middle so that you understand what it actually feels like. A number of years back, I remember showing this clip from the movie The Shack, which I am not recommending as a must-watch. I know some people have watched it. And the reason that I don't suggest it is because in the movie, God is portrayed as a woman, which if you read the Bible, God is never effeminate. It's always masculine, right? He is the Father. Jesus is the Son. And once again, he's always described in masculine form. So already a big significant error there, but I understand the reason behind that motivation. So I understand that. I'm still not suggesting it or endorsing it, but I did show a clip because it helps us to understand a little bit better maybe this life review scenario. And in this movie, The Shack, the main character begins to talk with wisdom, which again is portrayed as a woman, and he begins to share how his dad damaged him. Guys, I mean, let's just be honest. Some of us may have good dads, some of us don't. And they damage us to the point that we begin to damage others. Now, as he begins to have this life review or this review with wisdom, he begins to talk about his hatred for his dad. And in that, he begins to see this glimpse, almost like a life review, this projection of his dad. But he doesn't know it's his dad, and he sees this little boy that is getting abused by another man. And then it's told to him, it's relayed to him, that little boy that's getting abused, that should not be treated that way, that was his dad. And this is a reminder that our brokenness doesn't often come just from one generation. It stems back all the way to Adam. We're all broken people because somebody broke us that broke them. The pain that they have endured was a result of how they caused pain for others. So this is a reminder, once again, and this is a helpful reminder in these near-death experiences, that we have a choice to make each and every day that is going to impact other people's lives. And in eternity, we will see, and I believe we will experience the pain that we caused others. As a matter of fact, I believe that part of hell is that life review. If you get to experience the pain that you caused somebody else for eternity and experiencing that pain through their lens, I believe that's part of hell. I really do, and I'm convinced of it. So again, if you're a parent, remember that your children will begin to mirror what they experienced. If you are married, know that while you are likely the person that knows your spouse the best on this side of eternity, there is often more to their life that is unsaid. And I get it, unfortunately, it's felt. Extend grace. As Christians, our mission is not to try to figure out how to do as much good to counterbalance the sin in our lives, but to learn how to live like Jesus by doing for others what we would have them do for us. At the end, you really don't need to answer anyone else in this room, right? I mean, you're not here to try to confess your sins to me. You're not going to be responsible to me. But I am convinced that with what many NDEers say, there will be a point in eternity where you will recall, what did you do? And that will be the moment of judgment. Let's pray.